In the last video, I've explained all the components of CLV calculation. In this video, I will talk about, in practice, how to calculate CLV. There are two methods you can adopt to calculate CLV using the basic definition. They give roughly the same result, although the underlying mathematics is quite different. I will focus on most of the time on the first method because it is more intuitive and easier to understand. But of course, I will also demonstrate how to use the second method, but I will leave it as an optional choice for practice. In the first method, we calculate total CLV using the sum of CLV for each period, subtract acquisition cost. So if you look at this equation, the second part of this equation is very straightforward, just minus acquisition cost. So let's focus on the first part, how to get CLV for each period and sum them up. Say we are working on calculating CLV for a group of new customers we acquired recently. We can start the CLV calculation of period 0 when customers made their first purchase. So CLV for period 0 equals the number of customers who made their first purchase multiply average customer spend at period 0 multiply gross margin. Now we get one number by using this equation. After that, we should continue to calculate CLV for period 1, which accounts for the value generated in the first period after the first purchase. So just be aware that normally after the first purchase, some of the customers may not return to purchase. So retention rate, which we will talk about in last video, plays an important role here. CLV for period 1 is equal to the number of new customers multiply retention rate at period 1 multiply average customer spend at period 1 multiply gross margin. Now it gives you another number. After that, we want to continue calculate CLV for period 2. But be aware that only a fraction of new customers who were retained at period 1 and a fraction of those retained customers is retained at period 2. Basically, what it means is that at each period, a fraction of customers who are retained in the last period will lost during that period. You can only retain a certain number of customers at each period. So CLV for period 2 is equal to the number of retained customers at period 1 multiply retention rate at period 2 multiply average customer spend at period 2 multiply gross margin. Now from this 3 period of calculation, you can see a pattern here. We can repeat this process until the number of retained customers is less than 1 customer. We can use a more generalized equation such as CLV for period n is equal to the number of retained customer at periods n-1 multiply retention rate at period n multiply average customer spend at period n multiply gross margin. So basically, you need to calculate CLV for each of those periods until you don't have any customers left. And then you sum up all the numbers you got from those calculations and minus acquisition cost. That will be your total CLV. Okay, you may have noticed that while retention rate and average customer spend are period specific, meaning it changes over time, gross margin is not period specific. It is because gross margin tend to stay stable over a short period. Of course, if you have a reason to believe that the gross margin also changes in your business, feel free to make it period specific and adjust the calculation. Now, this concludes the first method of basic CLV calculation. Now, let's talk about how the second method works. With method 2, we can calculate total CLV using the number of customers we have at period 0, multiply the average customer lifetime, multiply the average spend per customer per period, multiply gross margin, and subtract acquisition cost. As you can see, method 2 is much cleaner than method 1. There are less words in this slide than the previous slide. Method 2 only asks you to plug in a couple of numbers into this equation to get total CLV, while you can see method 1 requires you to calculate CLV for each period until all customers are gone. But don't be cheated by this cleanliness. Even though it looks cleaner, there is a concept that isn't that easy to understand. Look at this equation. How do we know the average customer lifetime? Which means, on average, how long a customer will keep on buying from us. We don't know that. It's not one of the 6 components we talked about, but it is based on one of the components we talked about. The calculation of average customer lifetime is actually built on a very complicated mathematics theory, which I don't want to get into in this course. But I can tell you that it is calculated as 1 divided by 1 minus retention rate. Basically, if you have a retention rate of 70%, you're just using 1 divided by 1 minus 70% would be 1 divided by 30%, and that will be the average customer lifetime. It gives you an expected glance of a customer's life or relationship with your firm. In the examples I will talk about in the next section, I will use both method 1 and method 2, and you will see how their results compare with each other. But for now, you just need to know what it is, and we will practice more soon. Alright, to conclude this section, let me summarize it. So far, I've talked about basic and advanced definition of customer lifetime value. I've compared CLV with PCV and talked about the forward-looking nature of CLV. I've also covered the 6 components of CLV and provided with you 2 methods to calculate CLV using the basic definition. In the next section, I will use the cupcake example that we talked about in previous sections to demonstrate how to do CLV calculation in real action. By then, I hope you can practice together with me, not just by listening, but also get your hands dirty, and we will do the calculation together. See, you have achieved a lot to this point. I look forward to seeing you in the next section.